Let's talk to Tom Packer, fellow of UCL, Centre for US Politics. Tom, very good morning to you.
Good evening. Good morning, rather, Mike.
Well, I mean, you know, listen, we could be in the evening. I've been doing this show so long. Rachel Reeves off to Washington today. She's going to have probably a bit of a tough time because the IMF are going to issue their new ratings, I guess, for countries around the world. Britain may have a reduction in their rating. If that happens, obviously, you know, economic forecasts could get revised, etc., etc. It's not that clear. I mean, presumably she's going to try and get the tariffs removed, but it's not that clear what the Labour government will call a success, is it?
I think that's fair. I mean, I think it's fairly clear what they'll call a success, which is if they achieve anything, they will spin it, as politicians tend to do.
Yes.
But obviously, they'll try and remove as many tariffs as possible. There's talk, I'm not sure it's actually more than talk, that they might be able to achieve the elimination of some of the higher tariffs, but not the 10% so-called universal tariff. I think they'll be very keen to reduce tariffs, and part of the question is what they're willing to give themselves. Like, are they willing to give US farmers access to our market? And I think that's a bit vague. But the fact is, the UK economy is in a bit of a hole. Having close trade with the US, particularly if the US has barriers to other nations, could be very good for the UK economy. Right. There's a strong incentive to make a deal, and I think there's a good reason to think the Americans are up for a deal as well.
Yeah, because I mean things are sort of going backwards and forwards, aren't they? I mean nothing yet has been settled with almost any country. I don't think with the US. They keep, you know, Trump keeps sort of putting tariffs on, taking them off. You know, the markets are still slightly in turmoil. There was another drop in the stock markets in the US overnight. It's not that clear yet what the sort of long game is it?
No, I wouldn't say it's clear at all. And I think, I'm not sure Donald Trump himself is entirely clear what he's planning long term. I think there's been a lot of reacting to, he had very strong affection for tariffs since the 80s. Yeah. At the same time, he's, I think, been quite worried by the market and political reaction to it. That could easily grow if this turmoil continues. The Republicans are now behind in the polls for the midterm elections. The ratings of the economy, particularly on things like consumer confidence, are quite negative. I do also think he's obsessed with what's called trade deficits, where you buy more from you end up buying more from a country than they buy from you. Yeah. Britain looks quite good on that indice, particularly for trade, as most countries go. So that's another reason why a deal might well be more doable for Britain than it is for most other major nations. Right.
But in terms of Britain's own sort of economy, there's no great sort of light at the end of the tunnel at the moment, is there? I mean, regardless of what the IMF says, you know, the growth is pretty much stagnant. There's not really any hope that things are going to get any cheaper anytime soon. In fact, things are going to get more expensive in April, as they have done, and more expensive as we sort of go through the rest of the year.
I mean, the British economy has been doing very badly by historic standards for about 16 years. Yeah. I mean, a lot of it is things like too much regulations on planning, high energy costs, which are to a large degree the product of deliberate policy.
That's the real problem, isn't it?
But I do think Britain is a relatively open trading nation. We're very strong in services, which I think Trump and most other protectionists care less about goods. I do think we obviously have the ability to set our own trading policy since Brexit. So I do think we are potentially in a position to do a deal with the US. And Trump himself, everyone forgets he's second generation British. His mum was from Britain. He has massive affection for the British royal family. The thing is, though, the inconsistency Trump's been showing on tariffs makes it hard for almost anyone to have confidence in deals they strike with him and in the direction of policy.
Shall we have a look at some of the Easter Bunny activity that took place in the White House yesterday? Here's Trump and the Easter Bunny talking about Joe Biden.
Do you remember the bunny with Joe Biden? Remember? Do you remember when the bunny took Joe Biden out? He's not taking Trump out. Anyway, that was a beautiful moment when the bunny saved Joe Biden.
If you remember, there was a moment when Joe Biden appeared to not know where he was, and the bunny kind of showed him where to go. And that's the vision you can just see there. Joe Biden looked back at the bunny as if to say, do you work with us? I don't know. I mean, it's hard to... you sort of forget how bad Biden was, really, don't you?
I mean, I think, as people with elderly relatives actually have quite a lot of experience of this, I think that Biden was and probably still is one of these people who are actually quite cogent some of the time and confused some of the other time. And that I strongly suspect was a confused moment. I think.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is, most of our elderly relatives are not president of the United States of America.
That is quite true. Of course,
running
Donald
the
Trump
most powerful economy in the world.
Of course, Donald Trump is now older than Joe Biden was at this stage in his presidency. So he's obviously seems very full of beans and energy.
Yeah, I don't think it's an age thing.
We all know old people who are full of energy until suddenly they're not.
Yeah, no, it's not an age thing. I mean, my father got dementia in his old age, and my mother didn't, and they were completely different. One lasted longer than the other, you know. But it wasn't an issue of age, really, necessarily.
I did think the clip you were showing, it was very striking how embarrassed Mrs. Trump looked. I think one thing that Trump supporters need to acknowledge is that Donald Trump often doesn't know what he's talking about. One thing his opponents need to acknowledge is that he's often funny. You might not think that was a very nice comment, but it was a bit ridiculous to have a president with the capacity of Joe Biden towards the end as president.
It really was, yeah. And what was worse was the fact that people wouldn't admit that it was true. And that was the real damaging thing to I think, for the Democrats. And Democrats, by the way, who still have not recovered at all in any way, shape or form. I mean, some of them are walking around saying, oh, Kamala Harris is the best bet for the next presidential election, which is clearly not going to be the case.
I mean, America's very strong what's often called negative partisanship. People vote against the other party in quite common pattern. Fact is, the polls are now showing the Democrats leading for the midterms, partly in the wake of perhaps most importantly of all, in the wake of the tariff stuff. So a lot of people wrote off the Republicans in 2020 and 2008, and I think they're writing off the Democrats a bit prematurely now. I think if things continue as they go, the Democrats could do very well in 26 and potentially do very well in 28 as well. It's obviously early days, but I think all signs are the Democrats are about to have a revival in backlash against the Trump administration.
I mean, they can't go any further down. I think that's fair to say. Tom, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Tom Packer, fellow of UCL Centre for US Politics.